For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. World leaders from 7 nations have gathered in Hiroshima, Japan for the Group of 7, or G7 meeting. President Joe Biden is among them. He stepped away from default negotiations in the U.S. to attend the gathering. The war in Ukraine is high on the agenda.
We're deepening our cooperation with the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereign territory and holding Russia accountable for its brutal aggression. And we're tracking the global challenges from strengthening our community and our commitment to nuclear nonproliferation to ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific.
FSN's Chris Gilbert reports.
For Japan's Prime Minister and this year's G7 host, Fumio Kishida, months of planning and organization are about to be put into practice. The summit's being held in his hometown of Hiroshima, which was hit by an American nuclear bomb in 1945. Kishida reportedly chose the venue to promote peace and nuclear disarmament. The agenda is expected to focus on reducing G7 countries' reliance on Chinese exports, increasing financial pressure on Russia to hamper its ability to continue fighting in Ukraine, and reaching out to global South countries to diversify supply lines. It'll wrap up with a joint statement on Sunday. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo.
Biden is cutting his overseas trip short, saying he'll return to the U.S. Sunday for a news briefing about negotiations to lift the nation's borrowing limit. Republicans are still demanding cuts to social spending. The U.S. faces a national default on its debts as soon as June 1st. Georgia MAGA Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene announced articles of impeachment against President Biden this morning, citing his immigration policies.
Biden has blatantly violated his constitutional duty, and he is a direct threat to our national security. Therefore, Joseph Robinette Biden is unfit to serve as the President of the United States and must be impeached.
The Donald Trump ally blamed Biden for Trump's policies that separated immigrant children from their families at the U.S.-Mexico border and leaving thousands of those children unaccounted for to this day. She also announced articles of impeachment against FBI Director Christopher Wray, Attorney General Merrick Garland, and a U.S. prosecutor in Washington, D.C., Matthew Graves, over investigations into former President Donald Trump and the prosecution of Trump supporters for the deadly January 6th Capitol siege.
While Antifa and BLM terrorists have caused billions of dollars in property damage and taken lives, Garland instead persecutes Americans who engaged in legitimate political protest, people who were overwhelmingly nonviolent, many of them just walking through the Capitol. Garland's total politicization and perversion of the American justice system has only one remedy: impeachment.
And she announced articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, claiming he's allowed mass migration into the U.S. at the Mexico border. It's likely payback for Democrats' impeachment of former President Donald Trump, now a convicted sexual abuser who's also facing federal fraud charges. With Republican control of the House, impeachment is a real possibility. It will go nowhere in the Senate, where Democrats have a slim majority. Republicans will hear from an FBI whistleblower today and a House hearing on government weaponization. Ukrainian officials say Russia's fired 30 cruise missiles against various parts of the country in the latest nighttime test of Ukrainian air defenses, which they say shot down 29 of those missiles. Kiev officials said defense systems also shot down 2 exploding drones and 2 reconnaissance drones early today. A military spokesperson said 1 person was killed, 2 wounded by a Russian missile that got through and struck an industrial building in the southern region of Odessa. Lawyers seeking to preserve pregnant women's access to a drug used in the most common method of abortion, mifepristone, got pushback yesterday from appellate judges with a history of supporting abortion restrictions. A 3-judge panel of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments over whether the Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone should be revoked more than 2 decades after it was granted. U.S. attorneys argued that move would be unprecedented. The case is likely to wind up at the Supreme Court. South Carolina is nearing final legislative approval for a 6-week abortion ban. The House approved the bill yesterday, sending it back to the Senate for certain passage. A day after North Carolina lawmakers overrode the Democratic governor's veto of a 12-week abortion ban. A book publisher and First Amendment advocacy group are suing Florida's Escambia School District book ban over its removal of books about race and LGBTQ identities. Catherine Carley reports.
Book publisher Penguin Random House and free speech organization PEN America have filed a lawsuit against a Pensacola, Florida school district. They allege the district violated the First Amendment by removing more than 150 books, of which 60% dealt with race or LGBTQ issues. I'm Catherine Carley for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis signed a package of anti-trans bills Wednesday that bar gender-affirming care for minors, target drag shows, restrict discussion of personal pronouns in schools, and force people to use bathrooms that correlate to their born sex. Democrats oppose the bill. DeSantis is expected to announce his bid for presidency next week. Wells Fargo is facing yet another major lawsuit, this time alleging the banking institution, the fourth largest in the U.S., systemically denied loans or offered higher interest rates to Black, Latino, and Asian American customers when compared to whites. The complaint, filed before a federal judge in Northern California court, estimates the practices could have affected 750,000 people. Here's civil rights attorney Benjamin Crump.
We could have enjoyed unprecedented progress in closing the home ownership gap among Black Americans, building Black wealth and family stability, driving investment opportunities in Black neighborhoods, and increasing intergenerational wealth for Black families. Instead, Wells Fargo systematically denied Black Americans and other minorities mortgages.
The suit alleges Wells Fargo has violated a series of federal civil rights legislation, such as the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and the Civil Rights Act. I'm Christina Onestad reporting for Pacifica Radio.